very strong 3D animation house and a strong motion design team. So I think it was a nice fit for us. We were able to do Iron Man in 3D and get some extra motion, move the camera a little more.
Some of the challenges we had were working from specific art and telling the story in motion, and so we have the constraints of particular shots. The comic book itself is always grabbing that pinpoint moment that tells a story for a whole frame, and so when there's a lot of dialogue, that becomes a challenge trying to make that dialogue span the length of the shot.
I will say a comic book is the only thing in which you can have somebody falling down and in mid-fall they have a 20-second soliloquy. In many cases we added additional cuts. In some cases we added a few things that weren't in the comic just to try to keep the shot alive, because you can indeed read a 20 or 30 seconds worth of dialogue in a comic and not think anything about the fact that you're looking at one picture, but you do that in motion and it becomes boring quickly.
In general, we tried to keep things 2D. Iron Man was a good candidate for 3D, so we tried to, anything action-oriented in Iron Man was 3D, but in general we tried to keep as much 2D as we could. And so we tried to approach as much as possible the 2D look, the art that Eddie Grinoff did. We pulled away from the shiny reflective materials to a more subdued toon-like shader, and that's what we tried to hit every time. We
really looked at this much more as if we were trying to do cinema, and how would you cut through this shot if you were cutting a movie. I think in this particular case we were dealing with basically fully painted artwork, and I think that's one of the strengths of this is you look at it and it doesn't really look like anything else. You would never set out to do an animation and start with that look. The first thing you do would be simplify, move to solid spot colors. You would never have this incredibly painted artwork. Dealing with something that is as realistically painted as the original artwork was in Extremis, and adding motion into that fits that realistic look has been our biggest hurdle.
You're going to have to hand details of the process to the authorities. I've got some pull here and there, so we should... Excuse me.
The process begins with an animatic. This is just a rough animation and acts as a roadmap for the episode. It's where you get your timing down, and it's how you communicate the ideas with the rest of the team.
So based on the animatic, we come together for the different departments and try to discuss the solutions to the different challenges in the episode. And we discuss which elements we're going to leave with the 2D art and which elements are going to become 3D. And then we go over the different effects that we'll apply to each shot to try to enhance it.
From here, the specific assignments are handed out to the team. The first step, preparing the original art in Photoshop.
The 3D objects needed for each episode were created by our 3D modeling department. Iron Man's iconic armor was ideal for that department, and we took special care to really work the shaders and the textures to be as close as possible to Adi's version of the armor.
Upon completion of the 3D model, it has to have a rig. This is essentially a skeleton that is put into the 3D model to allow the animators to pose the character. There's also a facial rig put into the model so that lip sync and dialogue can be done.
So the best technique we could come up with was a hybrid solution where we used the 2D art and projected it onto a 3D mesh. And so then we did all our lip sync inside 3D animation software. The 2D animation was executed in After Effects, and we used a special tool in there called the Puppet tool.
The animators rely heavily on the existing art panels from the comic. If you notice, in all cases, the character actually moves through the same position that's seen in the comic panel. Some shots number up to 60 layers and even more. These layers, 2D, 3D, and effects, come together in the final compositing stage.
So there were certain types of elements that needed to be animated where we used a more dynamic approach where we had calculations do the animation for us as opposed to using keyframes. Examples of that are the curtains that slid in behind Tony Stark in Episode 1, and we also use dynamic animation on the Iron Man with the cables popping out of his back.
Massive amounts of digital data are wrangled through the Magnetic Dreams computer pipeline by the technology team. Their job is to keep the pipeline moving and to provide backup of critical files.
So during the compositing stage, we add in all the effects like flames, explosions, smoke, and blood, and all these things add to the richness of the shots.